everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Life with Patty. And you see, I got some new jammies. I love them, love them, love them. Well, let me tell you a quick story about that, and then I'll get on with what I'm doing. I told my husband, I don't know what happened to all my pajamas. They're gone. I only have 2 pair of pajamas, and I only wash once a week, and I do wash my pajamas every day. I don't wear the same pajamas more than one day. And he's like, are you sure you don't have any more than that of pajamas? I'm like, no, I can't find them anywhere. And the ones I have are really old. And he's like, are they in the storage unit? Or, I'm like, no, I can't find them anywhere. So I went to Walmart. I think I told you a few videos back, but I went to Walmart last week and I found 3 pair. This was one of the pair, and I think they were $12, and they're super comfy. Anyway, so I got home, I washed the clothes I was wearing and all my pajamas and dried them, and I went to put them away, and I thought, well, they're not going to fit in my drawer where my pajamas are because I had some other things in there. So I pulled out the drawer underneath it where my scarves were. There was all my pajamas. And I had already washed and taken the tags off of these, so, oh my gosh, well, I have more pajamas, but anyways, okay. Now on with why I'm doing this video in my pajamas, because I'm going to do my second, number 2, book review ever since I started this channel. And it's fresh in my mind. I just finished it maybe an hour ago, and so I wanted to share it with you. Okay. The book is called The Home for Unwanted Girls. The author is Joanna Goodman, and she also wrote The Finishing School, which I definitely will read now. I will order the book on Amazon, and I will read it, or I'll see if it's at the library, but I'm definitely going to read it. Joanna Goodman has only written 2 books in her career. This is her. And it says she lives in Toronto with her husband and her 2 children, is the owner of the Canadian Linen Company, and it's in French, Le Fine Linens, or Le Fine Linens, originally from Montreal, and she is also the author of The Finishing School. Okay. Well, so this book starts out, it's based in Canada in the 40s. It is of a husband and wife that are both from Canada. However, okay, let me go back a little further, okay? Just by reading that title, you're going to know that this is a dark book. This is a very dark book. And people say, why do you read dark books like that? Why do you read stuff like that? Well, people have told me often that I live in a bubble, that I was raised in a bubble. I remember when I worked at the hospital in medical records, and the girl that worked right next to me, we were talking one day, and she was talking about homeless people. And I said, is there really homeless people in the world? Come on. Is there really homeless people in the town we live in? And she told me I lived in a bubble. And she told me, Patty, there's homeless all around. She had told me about her life and how they lived in campsites all summer long. And they were constantly moving because of her mother not having a job, and drug addictions with her father, or alcohol addictions, whatever. But, so why do I read dark books? I guess because in some ways they teach me about the real world. And as sad as it might be, they're based most of the time on a true story. And so this one takes place in Canada, like I said. And I believe that it is supposed to be close to Montreal. There's 2 different towns that they go from Montreal to Quebec, I think. Anyways, so it's a husband and wife, and they're married, and he is an an Anglo-English Canadian, and she is a French Canadian. I didn't know there was any difference. I just thought Canadians were Canadians. But back in the day, I guess they considered that there was two different kinds of Canadians. And so she was a French Canadian, the wife, and she never learned English. And this book goes from the 40s to the 80s, to the early 80s. And the wife never learned English. She always spoke French. And her husband knew French, so of course he spoke that to her, but he also spoke English fluently. He was known as the seed man in this town that he lived in, and he lived there and sold seeds for crops, for flowers, for everything. And his daughter Maggie, which is one of 5 children that they had, husband and wife had together, always wanted to follow in her father's footsteps. She worked at the store since she was a little tiny girl, packaging the seeds, counting out the exact amount of seeds to go in each little package. And now this is back in the 40s when she was doing this. And always admired and looked up to her father. He was well known in the community as the seed man, and everybody, had respect for him. And his wife was French Canadian and bitter with her life. And she admits later in life that she married him for stability. And she told her daughter, Maggie, once that she married him because she thought she would have more stability and an easier life. But then she complained because she had 5 children, and the kids would always say she was the grumpy one, and they all tended to respect their father more than her. But as time went on, they learned that she was a good person, but she was very just old-fashioned and kind of a bitter woman, and she didn't really marry for love. She just married for stability. Anyways, so the neighbor next to them, they were French Canadians, and their son Gabriel would go out and work their cornfields all the time. And Maggie always would go out and just watch him, and she had the hugest crush on him. And the mother one time said, "I never thought you would fall for French. I thought you would always go towards the English Canadian." And the mother was kind of happy that she had met this Gabriel and had this crush on him. Well, the father didn't like it at all, and he didn't want her to be associated with this French Canadian. Gabriel was his name, and thought she could do better for herself. And so the father always was against it. Well, one day Maggie walked into her father's office and caught her father having a little affair with Gabriel's oldest sister. And so she thought it was just a one-time thing, and her father swore to secrecy, and she said of course she never would because she didn't want her family to break up. And she was mad at her father, but then she blamed the mother because she thought if the mother was more loving to the father, it would be better. I'm probably telling you way too much of the story. I should just let you read the book. But anyways, we're gonna skip ahead, and Maggie gets pregnant at 16 from Gabriel. Well, the father comes unglued, and this was in 1950. And he says she has to go live with their aunt and uncle, which would be her mother's sister and husband. And she has to go live with them until the baby's born, and then they will put the baby up for adoption to go to a good home somewhere, to somebody who can't have a baby of their own. And so Gabriel doesn't even know that she's pregnant, and she goes off to stay with her aunt and uncle. He comes to visit her A lot happens when she's there with her aunt and uncle that I guess I'll let you have some part of the book to read. And she ends up breaking up with Gabriel, tells him she doesn't want to see him anymore, and never tells him that she's pregnant with his baby. So as soon as she has the baby, they let her hold the baby in her arms, and she instantly falls in love with her, and then they take her away. And they tell her that she is being adopted out by a family. Well, the baby is premature, only weighs 4 pounds, and is jaundiced. Nowadays, we think nothing of something like that. So the family that was going to adopt the baby said they didn't want it because it had complications. So the baby went directly into an orphanage. And I guess in Canada in 1950, it was against the law to be to have a child out of wedlock. They took those children away, and the Catholic Church considered it to be a sin. That child was a sin, and so the orphanage was not. The nuns were not nice to the orphans for the most part. There was a few that were nice, and in 1957, the orphanage got bought out. Maybe it was 1954, but the orphanage got bought out by a hospital for an asylum for mentally disturbed, and they called them crazy and retarded, is what they called them in the book in 1954. I think it was 1954. So they sold the hospital, they sold the orphanage off because they could make more money with mental hospital patients than they could with orphans. And so then those orphans that were not adopted out, they declared them crazy. They declared them retarded because they wanted to keep them in there so that they could get paid for them. And so when she had this little baby, Maggie, she named it Eloise, which means sunflower in French, I believe. And they kept that name for her. They let the LOD. They kept that name for her, but the name of the mental hospital became her last name, or the orphanage. Anyways, so at 7 years old, Elodie now became a mental patient and had to do chores, take care of other people to earn her keep. And so then they ended up transferring about 12 of the kids to, I believe, Montreal, to a different mental hospital, which was way worse than the hospital that she was at in the other town. And so I won't get into everything that happened. I'll let you read some of the book. But they treated those children horrible. And they tied them up to the bed so that they wouldn't move. And they all got punished. If one did something wrong, they all got punished so that they would never do that. And I kept thinking, when the heck are they gonna, and she kept saying her mom was gonna come get her, and then finally the nuns told her her mother was dead. Well, Maggie reunited with Gabriel later on, and finally he found out from her friend that they had had a baby together that put up for adoption, and he was so mad at her because it was his child, and he said he would have married her and made it right, and that she chose her father over him. Anyways, they went looking for Elodie, and the nuns finally said, we remember her, but she died from being sick, and she was mentally retarded and severely handicapped. They said all these things so that Maggie would quit looking for her, and at the same time, they told Elodie that her mother had died at childbirth. So both women wouldn't give up on the fact that Her daughter was not dead. Her mother was not dead. They did not want to give up on that fact. When she turned 17, so this would be 1967, they released her with a few dollars in her pocket, and she lived with another orphan in a tiny apartment in, I believe, Montreal, and she got a job at a sewing factory because that was one of her jobs, was sewing sheets in the hospital. And then she got a job later at a deli, being a waitress, and she had welfare. And she ended up getting pregnant from somebody at 18, but she said no matter what, she could not give that child up because she knew what she went through and she would never do that to another child. And they said, her roommate told her, you have to keep it, and it's not against the law anymore. You can raise your child by yourself. All this time, the mother's still looking for her daughter. The daughter's still looking for her mother. And she finds out later that her father had put an ad in the paper in Montreal for the first Saturday of every month looking for Elodie and saying, if this is your name and you were born in 1950 at this hospital and you lived in this hospital, please contact this number. And it was Maggie's number, and she never knew it, and her father passed away. And that's how Elodie ended up finding her mother. I'm telling you so much that probably gonna ruin if you want to read the book. So I'm not going to tell you the ending of it, okay? So I told you that she did find her mom. I'm not going to tell you the rest of it because you have to have some of it to, to actually be surprised about. But let me tell you this. This book got to me so much that I hardly ever read the acknowledgments at the end of the book. I hardly ever read the acknowledgments, and I read them because I have what I call a book hangover. When I read a book like this and it's so dark that I get a book hangover and I can't read another book for a while, or I have to read a fluff book like a Danielle Steele book, something like that, because I have to absorb this in my body, like it gets into your soul, right? Well, she said thank you to all the different people that helped her. And she said it took her 20 years to write this book. Why would it take an author 20 years to write a book? Well, let me tell you. A simple paragraph that it says about the author. Joanna Goodman lives in Toronto with her husband and 2 children, originally from Montreal. Okay, those are the 2 towns that she has. She based Home for Unwanted Girl in part on the story of her mother. She is also the author of The Finishing School. So, this book is based on her mother. Her mother was raised in this orphanage and mental hospital. And when you read the end of the book, what Elodie asks of her mother then all ties together when you read that one paragraph about the author. And I was just like, wow. So she changed the names of the people, maybe some different times or whatever, but this was based in part on the story of her mother. And that's why it took her 20 years to write this book, because I'm sure this was hard for her mom. But in the book, when Elodie is having a hard time getting on with life, and her roommate, who was also in the orphanage at the same time as her, she said, Elodie, you have to move on. You have to forget the past. She's like, how are we going to forget the past? How are we going to forget all that stuff? And her roommate said, do something about it. Do something about it. Write a book. Go to have seminars and talk about it or whatever. write it down, but you've got to move past it. You've got to move on, which is hard to tell somebody to do, but yet the girl that's telling her to do it has lived the same life that she lived. So when you read the end of this book and you see what Elodie does with her mother that she finally finds after she's 22 years old when she finds her, then it makes sense when you read about the author. So, incredible book, Joanna Goodman. A 1 to 5 stars. I give it 5 stars. Yes, it's dark. Yes, it's so sad. It's so sad. It sticks with you, but it's such a good book. It's such a good book. And it really teaches you things about life and how it used to be and how it is now and how it's so different and how we should appreciate, even though we say, oh, times were simpler back then. I wish that I could live how it was back in the 40s or the 50s. In some ways, there's a lot of things that yes, okay, but a lot of things, no. So I recommend this book to all of you. Unless you have a problem with reading true stories about dark things like this. Like Kathy started to read it with me. We started to read it at the same time. I don't think Kathy made it through the book, and she said it just made her cry too much. So, but to me, in a way, it's history. It's real life history. So I'm glad I read it. And my workmate, she's gonna read it next, Writer's Mom. And then I had told Bonnie if she wants to read it, she can. Now, Bonnie, if you watch this review, you let me know if you decide if you want to read it or not. If you don't, I will probably just hang on to it. It's one of those books I'll just hang on to unless I want to share it with somebody else. I know Lilia wants to really read it. And Bonnie, if you want to read it, you can. If not, I don't know. But anyways, thanks you guys for the second book review. This one was a tough one. I don't know what I'm going to read next because, like I said, this one was hard. And I have a book hangover. And sometimes I go in spurts and I'll read like 10 of these books. And then I'm like, I can't take it anymore. I think I'm going to go with the easy Danielle Steele or Debbie McCumber, something like that, and then just decompose. So, all right, you guys, I just kind of wanted to do the review before I kind of forgot a lot of it, but I probably gave too much away to those that are going to read it, but me talking about it still doesn't do it justice to the book. So thanks for tuning in. And I hope somebody, if you guys read it, if one of you guys reads it, let me know. If you've already read it, let me know what you thought of it. So, all right, you guys have a great day. Take care, and I'll see you back here real soon. Bye-bye.